The call came during my birthday dinner. Ryan had arranged everything perfectly: the intimate corner table at Marcello's, the vintage Bordeaux I loved, even the way the candlelight caught the diamond on my finger. Then my phone lit up with my mother's name, and everything shifted. I'm Navaye, and I hadn't spoken to my mother in 3 years. Not since the Christmas dinner, where she'd systematically torn apart every life choice I'd made, while my sister Emily basked in her endless praise. The memory of that night still burns. "Aren't you going to answer it?" Ryan asked, his fork hovering mid-air. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hello? Your father's dead." My mother's voice carried no emotion, as if she were reading a grocery list. "The funeral's on Saturday. I expect you to be here." The world tilted sideways. "What? When did—" "Thursday morning. Heart attack." She paused, and I heard the familiar click of her lighter. "Emily's already here helping with arrangements. It would look inappropriate if you weren't present." "Of course." "Appearances, always appearances with Linda. I haven't seen him in 10 years, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you—" "Because despite your best efforts to pretend otherwise, you're still part of this family." The edge in her voice could cut glass. "And families show up, even the disappointing ones." Ryan reached across the table, squeezing my free hand. I pulled away. "I'll think about it." "Don't think too long. Some decisions have permanent consequences." The line went dead. Ryan studied my face. "What happened?" "My father died." The words felt foreign on my tongue. "Or rather, the man who walked out when I was 20 died." "I'm so sorry, Nev." He started to stand, probably to comfort me, but I held up my hand. "Don't, please." I grabbed my wine glass, draining it in one long swallow. "She wants me at the funeral. Says Emily's already there, playing the perfect daughter." "You don't have to go," but I did. Something in my mother's voice, that calculated coldness, told me this wasn't just about a funeral. This was a summons, a challenge. "Actually, I do." I caught our waiter's eye, signaling for the check, because if I don't show up, she wins, again. "This isn't a competition, Navai." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Everything's a competition with Linda. Every birthday, every achievement, every failure. It's all carefully weighted and measured against Emily's perfection." I pulled out my phone, already searching for flights. "And for once, I want to see what she's really playing at." "Then I'm coming with you." "No." The word came out sharper than intended. "Sorry, but I need to do this alone. Besides, you haven't met my mother. She'd eat you alive." Ryan's jaw tightened. "I can handle." "You really can't. Nobody can. That's her superpower." I stood, gathering my purse. She finds the weak spots, the tender places you didn't even know you had. Then she presses, hard, until something breaks. Like she did with you. I met his concerned gaze. "No, what she did to me was different. She didn't break me, she shaped me. Carved away pieces until I fit the mold she wanted. Or tried to." I smiled, but it felt more like baring teeth. "But I'm not that malleable anymore." The drive home was silent. Ryan kept glancing at me, probably waiting for tears or a breakdown. But all I felt was a strange, cold clarity. My father was dead. My mother was summoning me home. Emily was already there, no doubt positioning herself perfectly in the spotlight of grief. And for the first time in years, I had a chance to step back into that poisoned garden of a family and maybe, finally, pull up some roots. I just had to be careful not to get tangled in them again. The box sat on my father's desk like a time bomb. Cardboard, weathered at the corners, with my name scrawled across the top in his messy handwriting. I traced the letters, feeling the indentations his pen had left. "Don't get too excited," Emily said from the doorway. "It's probably just more of his broken promises." I didn't turn around. "Shouldn't you be helping Mother plan the perfect funeral?" "Already done. Black roses, string quartet, catered reception." Her heels clicked across the hardwood floor. "Mother wanted white lilies, but I convinced her black roses would be more dramatic. Of course she did. Emily always knew exactly how to play to our mother's flair for theatrics. You haven't changed the room, I observed, taking in the familiar leather chair, the wall of books, even the half-empty Scotch bottle on the corner shelf. Mother couldn't bear to. David suggested turning it into a home office, but Emily picked up a framed photo from the desk. Well, you know how she gets about preserving things exactly as they were. Except when it came to me, I was the only thing Linda had ever wanted to change. The box felt heavy in my hands as I lifted it. Inside, I found a collection of seemingly random items: an old baseball, a dried corsage, a stack of birthday cards I'd made him, and beneath it all, a sealed envelope. What's that? Emily moved closer, her perfume, Mother's signature scent, making my head swim. Nothing that concerns you. I tucked the envelope into my jacket pocket. Everything in this house concerns me. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I'm the one who stayed, remember? The one who helped pick up the pieces after you ran away. Ran away? I laughed. Is that what Mother's telling people now? She doesn't have to tell them anything. They saw it themselves. You abandoning your family right when... When what? When she was orchestrating your perfect life? When she was systematically destroying mine? The door creaked, and David appeared, looking uncomfortable as always. Girls, your mother wants everyone downstairs for dinner. Emily's demeanor shifted instantly, her voice honey-sweet. Of course, Daddy. We were just reminiscing. I followed them down to the dining room, where Linda sat at the head of the table like a queen holding court. The good china was out, the set she'd always said I wasn't careful enough to handle. Emily, darling, tell Nevi about your promotion, Linda said as the first course arrived. Oh, it's nothing really. Emily's false modesty was perfectly practiced. Just made partner at the firm, youngest in the company's history. Following in your father's footsteps, Linda beamed, unlike some who preferred more creative pursuits. The jab was familiar, but it still stung. My successful photography career meant nothing to her. It wasn't part of her prescribed path. Actually, I said, reaching for my wine, I just landed a major gallery showing in New York. How lovely. Linda's smile was arctic. Emily's firm just opened their New York office. Perhaps she can help you network with some actual professionals. David cleared his throat. The salmon is excellent tonight. It's overcooked, I said, just to be contrary. Emily touched our mother's arm. I can have my chef give yours some tips, Mother. He trained in Paris. The conversation continued like this, a carefully choreographed dance of praise and subtle daggers. But my mind was on the envelope in my pocket, growing heavier with each passing minute. Finally, as dessert arrived, Linda fixed her gaze on me. I assume you'll be staying through the weekend? Emily's handling the eulogy, of course, but we should present a united front. Actually, I found something interesting in Father's study. I pulled out the envelope, watching her face carefully. Care to explain why it's dated the day before he left? The colour drained from Linda's face. Emily's fork clattered against her plate. That's private correspondence, Linda said sharply. Nothing in this family is private. Isn't that what you always taught us? David stood abruptly. Perhaps we should... Sit down, David, Linda snapped. Then, composing herself, Nevaeh, dear, you're obviously tired from your journey. We can discuss this tomorrow after you've rested. But I was already breaking the seal, the sound of tearing paper loud in the sudden silence. Emily's voice held a note of panic I'd never heard before. Mother, shouldn't we... Enough. Linda's command cracked like a whip. Nevaeh, give me that letter, now. I met her eyes across the table, seeing real fear there for the first time in my life. No, Mother, I don't think I will. The letter burned in my hands like a lit fuse. Father's words, written a decade ago, unraveled everything I thought I knew about the day he left. My dearest Nevaeh, by the time you read this, Linda will have convinced everyone that I abandoned our family. The truth is more complicated. She gave me an ultimatum. Linda's hand shot across the table, but I jerked away, keeping the letter out of reach. You told him to choose, I said, my voice trembling. between his career and his family. But that wasn't the real choice, was it? You have no idea what you're talking about. Linda's composure cracked slightly. Your father made his own decisions. After you threatened to expose his affair, I continued reading aloud. The affair you fabricated evidence for. Emily's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. Nobody moved to clean it up. Mother, Emily's voice had lost its usual polish. What is she talking about? Your sister is obviously disturbed. Linda stood, smoothing her silk blouse. David, please show Navai to her room. I think she needs to rest. I couldn't bear to see you blamed for my departure, I read on. But Linda made it clear. Either I leave quietly, or she would destroy both our reputations. She had already arranged the evidence. Enough. Linda's palm slammed against the table. That letter is a desperate man's attempt to absolve himself of responsibility. The photos were fake, I said. The emails, the hotel receipts. You manufactured all of it, to drive him away. David finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Linda, is this true? Of course not. But her hand trembled as she reached for her wine. I protected this family. I always have. By destroying it, I laughed, the sound harsh and foreign. By making me believe for 10 years that my father chose to abandon me. Emily rose slowly, her face pale. The trust fund, the one father left, it was supposed to be split equally. Emily, darling, now isn't the time, but you said Neve forfeited her share when she cut ties with the family. Emily's eyes narrowed. Did you forge those documents too? The silence that followed was deafening. Linda's mask slipped for just a moment, but it was enough. I saw the calculation behind her eyes, the rapid assessment of damage control options. Everything I did, she said carefully, was to protect this family's legacy, to ensure the right person would carry it forward. The right person? I stood so quickly my chair toppled backward. You mean the daughter you could control, the one who would play her part in your perfect family fantasy? I made you stronger, Linda hissed. Everything I did was to push you to excel, to be worthy of... Worthy? The word tasted like poison. You systematically destroyed every achievement, every relationship, every piece of confidence I ever had. And for what? So Emily could shine brighter in comparison. Don't drag me into your paranoid delusions, Emily snapped, but her voice wavered. I turned to her. Check your trust fund, Emily. Check the original documents. See how many signatures Mother forged to redirect my share to you. Linda moved with surprising speed, snatching a crystal vase from the sideboard and hurling it at the wall near my head. Water and flowers exploded across the expensive wallpaper. You ungrateful child, she seethed. After everything I've sacrificed, the only thing you've sacrificed is the truth. I pulled out my phone, showing her the screen. And Ryan's been recording this entire conversation. Every confession, every threat. The color drained from Linda's face. You wouldn't dare. Try me. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I'm not that scared little girl anymore, Mother. And I'm done letting you write my story. David, Linda called sharply, but when we turned, his chair was empty. Through the dining room window, I watched him walk to his car, get in, and drive away without looking back. Emily made a small, broken sound. Mother, what have you done? But Linda wasn't looking at Emily. Her eyes were fixed on me, filled with something I'd never seen before. Fear. You'll regret this, she whispered. I picked up Father's letter, carefully refolding it. No, Mother, the only thing I regret is not seeing through you sooner. As I walked out of the dining room, I heard Emily start to cry, but I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to show weakness now. The game had changed, and for the first time, I was the one making the rules. Ryan's voice crackled through my phone. You need to see this. A link appeared in our chat, leading to the local news website. There, splashed across the digital front page, was a photo of my father's law firm building with the headline, Prominent Attorney's Death Raises Questions About Missing Client Funds. My hands went numb. Through the window of my hotel room, I could see the funeral home across the street, where tomorrow they'd bury a man whose reputation was about to be destroyed. Mother's doing, I said. Are you sure? The article mentions anonymous sources close to the family. I watched a black SUV pull up to the funeral home. Emily stepped out, immaculate in designer mourning wear. Emily's firm handled those client accounts after Father left. She would have access to everything. Never. Ryan hesitated. Maybe you should come home. This is getting dangerous. A sharp knock interrupted us. Through the peephole, I saw David, looking more haggard than ever. I have to go. I ended the call before Ryan could protest. David burst in the moment I opened the door. Did you know? His hands shook as he paced. About the missing money. What are you talking about? $3 million, Nevaeh. Gone. And Linda, she's saying your father. He collapsed into a chair. She has documents, transfer records, all dated right before he left. She's lying. But even as I said it, Father's letter burned in my pocket. What else hadn't he told me? The board meeting's tomorrow morning. David's voice cracked. They're voting to remove Emily as partner, pending investigation. Linda's threatening to release everything to the press unless... Unless what? Unless you publicly confirm the story. Back up Linda's version of events. The pieces clicked together. Of course, Linda needed a witness, someone who could claim their father had confessed his crimes before leaving. Someone whose testimony would protect Emily's position at the firm. My phone buzzed. Emily, we need to talk, alone. I found her in Father's study 20 minutes later. She stood at his desk, holding a familiar-looking file. Did you know, she said without turning, that Father left you controlling interest in the firm? The room tilted slightly. What? It's all here, his original will, the ownership transfers, everything. She laughed bitterly. Mother spent 10 years hiding it, forging documents, redirecting your shares to me. But she missed this copy. Why are you showing me this? Emily finally turned. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide her exhaustion. Because Mother's plan will destroy everything Father built, and I need your help to stop her. My help? I stepped closer. Or my signature on whatever document gives you full control. You don't understand. These client accounts, Mother's been embezzling for years, using Father's old passwords, forged authorizations. If this investigation goes forward, it all leads back to you, I finished, since you've been managing those accounts. I didn't know. Her voice cracked. I trusted her, just like you trusted Father. A text lit up my phone. Linda, the press conference is at 9 a.m. Don't disappoint me, dear. What's it going to be, Nevaeh? Emily's mask slipped, showing real fear. Help me protect the firm, or watch Mother burn it all down. I pulled out Father's letter. There's a third option. What? We tell the truth, all of it. The forgeries, the manipulation, the stolen money. Everything. She'll destroy us. No. I met her eyes. She'll try, but I have evidence. Father's letter, Ryan's recordings, your documents. Together we could... Together? Emily laughed harshly. When have we ever been together, Nevaeh? Mother made sure of that years ago. My phone buzzed again. Ryan, warning me about reporters gathering outside the funeral home. Choose quickly, sister. Emily held out the file. Mother's press conference is in 12 hours, and she always wins these games. I looked at the file, then at Father's letter. The choice felt like a noose tightening. Protect Emily and become complicit in Linda's schemes, or expose everything and watch our family's legacy crumble. But maybe there was another way, one that would require perfect timing, absolute trust, and the biggest gamble of my life. You're right about one thing, I said, reaching for the file. Mother always wins these games, so maybe it's time we change the rules. The USB drive felt impossibly small for something containing enough evidence to destroy my family. I watched the data transfer progress bar inch forward on my laptop, while Linda's voice drifted up from the garden below. Of course the funeral will proceed as planned, she was saying to someone. The press conference beforehand will clarify any misconceptions about Charles's legacy. My phone buzzed. Emily. Mother's gathering the board members early. Whatever you're planning, do it now. I checked the security footage Ryan had helped me access. Linda was in the garden, orchestrating tomorrow's performance like a theatre director. David's car was still missing from the driveway. And Emily was approaching my door. The knock came soft but insistent. "It's done," she said when I opened it. "The documents you wanted. Mother keeps everything in her private safe." She handed me a manila envelope, her perfect manicure catching the light. I had to wait until she was distracted with the funeral arrangements. "And the board members' contact information. All here." She tapped the envelope. "But Mother's already reaching out to them. Whatever you're planning, the less you know, the better." Emily's laugh was bitter. "Still don't trust me? Should I?" The data transfer completed with a soft chime. Emily's eyes darted to the laptop. "What's on that drive?" "Insurance." I ejected it, slipping it into my pocket. "Go back to the garden. Keep Mother occupied." "She's not stupid, Nivea. She knows something's coming." "Good." I checked my watch. "The reporters are already gathering outside. Let her perform for them one last time." Emily lingered in the doorway. "What happened to you? The sister I remember would never... The sister you remember died the day Father left." I met her gaze. Mother made sure of that. My phone lit up again. "Ryan. Live feed ready. Sure about this?" Before I could respond, Linda's voice cut through the house like a blade. "Emily, darling, the caterers need your input on tomorrow's arrangements." Emily's mask slipped back into place. "Coming, Mother." But she hesitated, turning back to me. "Whatever you're planning, just remember, some wounds don't heal." "I'm counting on it." Once she left, I opened Father's letter again, focusing on the part I'd kept secret. "The proof is in the paintings, your mother's greatest pride and her greatest vulnerability." I moved to the study where Linda's prized art collection hung. Original pieces worth millions, the cornerstone of her carefully curated image. I ran my fingers along the frames until I found it, the slight gap behind her favorite Monet. The hidden compartment contained exactly what Father described. Ledgers, dating back 15 years. Each page detailed Linda's systematic dismantling of his life, his reputation, his relationships, and more recently, her manipulation of client funds through Emily's position at the firm. My hands shook as I photographed each page. The final ledger entry was dated 3 days before Father's death. A message from Ryan popped up. "Live stream setup complete. Broadcasting range, 5-mile radius, including the funeral home and law firm." I touched my earpiece. "How many viewers so far?" "Over 300. Local news picked up the signal." Heavy footsteps approached the study. I barely had time to return the ledgers before Linda appeared in the doorway. Admiring the collection, her smile was razor-sharp. "Your father never appreciated fine art, but you always had an eye for value." "Like that Monet?" I gestured to her favorite piece. "Must be worth a fortune." "Priceless, actually." She moved closer, wine glass dangling from her fingers. "Though not as valuable as family loyalty." "Is that what you're calling it now? Choose your next moves carefully, dear." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Emily told me about your little investigation. Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" My phone vibrated. Viewer count 1,000 plus. Linda's eyes narrowed at the sound. "Tomorrow's press conference will proceed exactly as planned. You will support Emily's position at the firm, and this rebellious phase of yours will end." "Or what? Or I'll finish what I started with your father." She took a slow sip of wine. "Only this time, there won't be anywhere for you to run." The livestream counter ticked higher. In my pocket, the USB drive contained enough evidence to destroy her. In the envelope Emily provided, the board members waited for the truth. And somewhere in the city, David was deciding whether to return for tomorrow's performance. I met Linda's gaze. seeing not the powerful matriarch she pretended to be, but a desperate woman clinging to control. "You're right about one thing, Mother." I moved toward the door. "This ends tomorrow, just not the way you planned." The press conference podium stood empty in the funeral home's front garden, surrounded by a sea of reporters and cameras. Through the window, I watched Linda adjust her black veil, rehearsing her performance of grieving widow one last time. My phone buzzed. "Emily." "Mother found the hidden camera in her study, she knows." Before I could respond, Linda's voice cut through the house like a blade. "Everyone in the living room, now." I found them all there. Linda, poised in her armor of Chanel and perfect makeup. Emily, unnaturally still on the settee. And David, who had returned sometime during the night, looking hollowed out. "Quite the audience you've gathered outside," Linda said, gesturing to the window. "But then, that was the point, wasn't it?" She held up my USB drive between manicured fingers. My stomach dropped. "How did you—" "Oh, darling," she smiled. "Did you really think Emily was helping you?" Emily wouldn't meet my eyes. Her hands twisted in her lap, a childhood gesture I hadn't seen in years. "Show her," Linda commanded. Emily pulled out her phone, opening a video chat history with Linda. Every conversation, every secret plan, every piece of evidence I'd gathered, she'd reported it all. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered. She threatened to expose my involvement in the client accounts. "Which you knew about all along," I realized. "The missing money, the forged documents. You helped her frame Father." "I did what I had to do to survive," Emily's voice cracked. "Just like you're doing now." Linda moved to the window, watching the crowd outside grow. "In 10 minutes, I'll announce that due to recent revelations about your mental state, you've been admitted for psychiatric evaluation. Poor, troubled Nevaeh, unable to cope with her father's death, making wild accusations. No one will believe you. They'll believe the medical records." She produced a manila envelope. "Dating back years, all perfectly documented." David finally spoke. "Linda, this is too far." "Too far?" She laughed. "Our daughter tried to destroy this family. Everything I've built, everything I've protected her from." "Protected?" The word tasted like ash. "You destroyed Father's life. You stole my inheritance. You turned Emily into a survivor," Linda cut in. "Unlike you, she understood what really matters. Family loyalty, sacrifice, power." My phone vibrated, Ryan's final warning. The live stream was still active, waiting for my signal. But Linda held all the evidence, and Emily had betrayed me one last time. "The press is waiting," Linda continued. "So here are your options. Sign these commitment papers voluntarily, or I release everything. The proof of your father's embezzlement, your history of instability, and of course, the evidence of your own financial misconduct." "What misconduct?" Emily pulled out another file. "The transfers you made last night, moving firm assets to offshore accounts, all traced back to your login credentials." My head spun. They had thought of everything, every possible move, every defense, systematically stripped away. "Tick-tock, dear." Linda held out a pen. "The reporters are getting restless." I looked at David, but he just shook his head, defeated. At Emily, who had learned our mother's lessons too well. At the pen in Linda's hand, waiting to sign away my freedom, my truth, my revenge. "If I sign," my voice barely a whisper, "what happens to Father's reputation?" "We'll protect it, of course." Linda's smile was triumphant. The prodigal daughter, returning home to honor her father's legacy, only to suffer a tragic breakdown. The family, united in grief, supporting her recovery. She was already crafting the narrative, weaving her web of lies into something the world would consume eagerly. And I would disappear into some private facility, my evidence dismissed as delusions, my truth buried with Father. My phone buzzed one last time. Not Ryan, but a text from an unknown number. "Parking lot, 2 minutes. Bring the truth." D. David's eyes met mine for a fraction of a second before he looked away. Linda held out the pen again. Time to end this, Navaye, for all our sakes. I reached for it, watching Emily's shoulders relax, seeing Linda's victory shine in her eyes. The pen felt heavy, like Father's letter in my pocket, like the weight of 10 years of lies. You're right, Mother. I took the pen. It's time to end this. But as I stepped forward, I wasn't thinking about signing those papers. I was thinking about David's message, about the live stream still running, and about how sometimes the only way to survive a spider's web is to burn it down, even if you burn with it. The parking lot was empty except for David's car and a single news van. Through the funeral home's glass doors, I could see Linda approaching the podium, Emily at her side like a perfect reflection. You have something for me? David's voice came from behind a marble column. I held up Father's letter. And the ledgers, everything Linda used to destroy him. She'll deny it all. He stepped into view, his face haggard. She always does. Not this time. I pulled out my phone, showing him the live stream. Because she's about to confess everything herself. Linda's voice carried through the speakers, practiced and precise. We gather today not just to mourn Charles, but to address certain concerns about his legacy. David's eyes widened. The Monet. What? In her study. The real ledgers. They're hidden in the frame. She keeps her true records separate from the ones she showed you. My heart stopped. Emily gave me the wrong documents. No. His voice hardened. Emily gave you exactly what Linda wanted you to find. Through the doors, I watched Emily slip away from the podium, moving purposefully toward the house, toward Linda's study. She's not just covering for Mother, I realized. She's taking over. David nodded grimly. While you and Linda destroy each other, Emily gets everything. The firm, the estate, the truth. She played you both. Linda's voice continued. My daughter Nevaeh's recent behavior has raised concerns. Go, David said. I'll stall Linda. I ran, through the side entrance, up the stairs, down the hallway that held 20 years of perfect family photos. I found Emily in the study, the Monet already off the wall, her hands working the frame's edge. It was never about Mother, was it? I said. She didn't turn around. You were so focused on revenge, you never saw the bigger picture, just like Father. The client accounts, the forged documents, you set it all up, used Mother's obsession with control against her, and used your obsession with justice against you. The frame came apart in her hands. We all play our parts, Nevaeh. I just played mine better. She pulled out a thin leather notebook. Mother's real ledger, every crime, every manipulation, every weakness, documented in her own hand. The perfect weapon. Against her, and me. Against anyone who stands in my way. She smiled, and for the first time, I saw neither Linda's cunning nor my father's warmth, just cold ambition. Did you really think I'd stay the perfect daughter forever? A commotion erupted from outside. Through the window, I saw David at the podium, Linda trying to pull him away as he spoke into the microphones. It's over, Emily. The live stream, the press, everything's coming out. No. She held up her phone. Everything's going exactly according to plan. The screen showed an email draft, addressed to the firm's board. Attached were documents showing my fingerprints all over the missing client funds, along with psychiatric records painting me as dangerously unstable. Mother's not the only one who knows how to destroy someone, Emily said softly. I learned from the best. She moved toward the door, but I stepped in her way. You forgot something. What's that? I learned too. I held up my phone, showing the camera feed from the study. Everything she'd just said, streaming live to the press outside. The color drained from her face. You wouldn't. Already did. I stepped closer. We all play our parts, remember? She lunged for my phone, but I was ready. We crashed into Linda's desk, sending papers flying. The leather notebook slipped from Emily's grasp, sliding across the floor toward the door, where Linda stood, watching her perfect world shatter. Mother, Emily started, But Linda wasn't looking at Emily. Her eyes were fixed on me, seeing something she'd never seen before, herself, reflected back in all her ruthless glory. "The press is waiting," I said, using her own words against her. "Time to end this, for all our sakes." Linda picked up the notebook, her hands trembling slightly. Through the window, cameras flashed as David continued speaking, telling his truth at last. "Well played," Linda whispered, and for a moment I saw something like pride in her eyes. Then she straightened her spine, adjusted her perfect mask, and turned toward the door. Toward the consequences we'd all have to face. Emily grabbed my arm. "You've destroyed everything." "No," I said, watching Linda walk away. "I just finally learned how to play the game." Father's funeral proceeded without Linda or Emily present. They were both downtown, answering questions about missing funds and forged documents. David sat beside me in the front row, his silence more comforting than any words could have been. After the service, I found myself alone in Linda's study, surrounded by the evidence of her carefully constructed life. The Monet's empty frame hung like a wound on the wall. On her desk, newspaper headlines screamed about scandal and betrayal. My phone buzzed. "Ryan, board meeting's over. Emily's out. Linda's facing charges." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened Father's letter one last time, focusing on the part I'd kept secret from everyone. "The greatest revenge isn't destruction, Nivaye. It's living well despite those who tried to break you." The study door opened. Linda stood there, looking smaller without her usual armor of perfection. "They're selling the house," she said flatly, "and the art collection, part of the settlement." "I know." I carefully refolded the letter. "The firm's partners called. They're restructuring, starting fresh. Under your leadership." It wasn't a question. Emily told them everything, trying to save herself, but she only proved why you should take your rightful place. I turned them down. Linda's mask cracked slightly. "What?" "I'm opening my own photography studio instead." I met her gaze. "With the money Father left me, the real inheritance you hid all these years. You're walking away, after everything." "I'm choosing myself, finally." I stood, gathering my things. "Emily chose power. You chose control. I'm choosing freedom." "Freedom?" Linda laughed bitterly. "There's no such thing. Someone always holds the strings." "Only if you let them." David appeared in the doorway, carrying a box of his belongings. "The car's ready." Linda's hands trembled slightly. "David, please." "No, Linda." His voice was gentle but firm. "Not this time." I moved to leave, but Linda grabbed my arm. "You think you've won? That destroying this family makes you stronger than me?" "No, Mother." I carefully removed her hand. "Walking away does." In the hallway, I paused at the family portrait from my childhood, the perfect family frozen in time. I took it off the wall, removed the photo, and found what I knew would be there, a small key taped to the back. "The safe deposit box," Linda whispered. "You knew?" "Father told me, in the letter." I handed her the key. "It's your last chance to do the right thing, to give back what you stole from the firm's clients." "Why are you—" "Because I don't want revenge anymore. I want peace." I left her there, standing amid the ruins of her empire. David waited by his car, a question in his eyes. "You're sure about this?" he asked. "About walking away?" "Yes." I looked back at the house one last time. "About forgiving?" "I'm working on it." Emily's car pulled up. She stepped out, designer clothes, replaced by something simpler. Our eyes met briefly before she walked past us into the house. No words, no accusations, no apologies. Just quiet acknowledgement of what we'd all lost, and maybe, someday, what we might find again. Ryan was waiting at the airport. "The studio space is perfect," he said. "Just needs your vision." I took his hand, feeling the weight of Father's letter in my pocket. The final lines echoed in my mind. "The hardest part isn't surviving their games, dear one. It's choosing not to play anymore." As we walked away, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from an unknown number. The key worked. The money's being returned. L. I deleted it without responding. Some answers aren't meant to be given. Some wounds aren't meant to be reopened. And some victories come not from winning, but from changing the rules entirely. Behind us, a plane took off, its shadow briefly darkening the terminal windows. I thought about Emily in that big empty house, Linda in her new, smaller world, and David starting over somewhere quiet. All of us scattered now, like pieces of a broken mirror, each reflecting a different truth, but my reflection was finally my own. And that, more than any revenge, was worth everything.
Life after the pandemic felt like a never-ending remix of the same sad song. First, it took Dad. A cough that wouldn't quit, a fever that wouldn't budge. Then Mom, a month later, the hospital walls echoing with the beeping of machines, the sterile scent of disinfectant a constant reminder of the fight she was losing. Two wonderful people, gone in a blink, stolen by a stupid virus. I was Amelia, 25 years old, and suddenly an orphan for the second time. The first time, the orphanage walls felt cold and the other kids were strangers. This time, the emptiness felt different, a hollow ache in a house filled with memories. The lawyer called it a nest egg, $100,000 left behind by Mom and Dad. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a lifeline. They'd always encouraged my dancing, taking me to classes, watching every recital with tears in their eyes. It felt right to honor that love. So, I took a deep breath, wiped away the tears blurring my vision, and rented out a smaller place closer to downtown, a cozy 2-bedroom with hardwood floors that begged to be danced on. That's where Amelia's Studio of Grace was born. The first few months were a hustle. Flyers plastered on every lamppost, online ads that ate up my meager savings, and countless no thank yous from parents who couldn't afford lessons. But slowly, word spread. Maybe it was the catchy jingle I recorded myself singing, slightly off-key, but hey, enthusiastic, or maybe it was the free introductory class I offered. Whatever it was, kids started trickling in. Lily, a shy 6-year-old with pigtails that bounced as she danced, became my first star student. Her parents, a sweet couple who worked double shifts, practically beamed with pride at their daughter's newfound confidence. Then came the boisterous Miller brothers, 8 and 10, with boundless energy and a competitive streak a mile wide. My days were a whirlwind of giggles, missteps, and the sheer joy of seeing them discover the rhythm within. Social media became my best friend. I started posting short videos of myself dancing, leaps, pirouettes, the occasional spectacular stumble that always ended in laughter. It felt like a risk at first, putting myself out there like that. But the response was amazing. Comments flooded in, "Wow, you're amazing. You inspire me to dance again." Even a few messages from fellow dance teachers, offering tips and encouragement. One day, a notification popped up, a like and a comment on a particularly sassy salsa routine I'd posted. "Damn girl, you can move," it read. A little cheeky, sure, but it made me smile. This David guy kept popping up on my videos, leaving comments that were more than just compliments. He talked about music, shared his favorite dance routines, and even quoted some ballet greats I admired. David was funny, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in everything I did, from the intricacies of a grand jeté to my favorite childhood cartoon. One sunny afternoon, a giant bouquet of lilies, my absolute favorite, appeared outside the studio door, a card signed simply, "Your biggest fan." And there he stood, leaning against the brick wall, a sheepish grin on his face. It wasn't fireworks at first sight, but a slow burn. Dates filled with laughter and stolen kisses, weekends spent exploring hidden cafes and art galleries. A year later, we were saying I do under a canopy of white roses, surrounded by friends and family. Moving into David's apartment was supposed to be the next chapter, a fresh start, a real family, as he called it. His mom, Beatrice, lived downstairs, a tiny, energetic woman with a smile that could light up a room. At first, she doted on me, showering me with compliments and homemade cookies. "You're good for David, Amelia," she'd say, squeezing my hand. "He needs someone like you to keep him grounded." But 6 months in, the cracks started to show. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day at the studio, I collapsed onto the couch, scrolling through social media mindlessly. Suddenly, Beatrice popped her head through the doorway, her smile replaced by a tight frown. "Still glued to that phone, Amelia?" she said, her voice sharp. "Don't you think David deserves a little more attention than some random dance video?" I froze. "It's just a couple of students," I mumbled, shoving my phone into my pocket. "Students, huh?" Beatrice scoffed. "All those men watching you wiggle around online? How do you think that makes David feel?" Her words hung heavy in the air, laced with suspicion. My cheeks burned. "There's nothing wrong with a few dance videos," I snapped, surprised by the rising anger in my voice. "It's how I advertise my classes." Beatrice sniffed. "Well, maybe you should advertise a little less shimmy and a little more stay-at-home wife." Then, without another word, she flounced back downstairs, leaving me fuming. David came home later that night, oblivious to the tension simmering in the air. I tried to tell him about Beatrice's comments, but he just brushed it off. "Mom's just worried, Ames. You know how she is." His casual dismissal stung more than Beatrice's words ever could. This was supposed to be my family, a safe space. Yet, here I was, feeling like an outsider in my own marriage. David started poking holes in my dreams with the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. "Teaching kids to twirl around in tutus? That's not exactly gonna pay the bills, Ames," he'd say, a smirk playing on his lips. He kept pushing this idea of me getting a real job, something serious, like an office manager. But my studio boomed. More kids, more smiles, more of that pure joy that only comes from seeing tiny humans discover the magic of movement. Business was good, really good. So good that after a year, I sat David down, spreadsheet in hand, ready to share the studio's financial success story. The numbers were clear. Amelia's Studio of Grace was a money-making machine. His reaction was not what I expected. He slammed the damn spreadsheet on the table, his face turning a shade of red that rivaled my best pirouette outfit. "What the hell is this?" he bellowed. "You think you can just prance around online half-naked and call it work? Shut this ridiculous thing down and be a proper wife." My jaw hit the floor. "Half-naked? David, those are dance videos, for crying out loud." I sputtered, completely bewildered. "Don't play innocent, Ames," he snarled. "All those creeps ogling you online? This ain't some highfalutin art project, it's a glorified peep show." Tears welled up in my eyes. This wasn't the man I fell in love with, the man who supported my dreams. This was a stranger, his voice laced with a possessiveness that sent shivers down my spine. "The studio is my passion, David," I managed to say, my voice tight. "And it's supporting our family just fine." He scoffed. "Supporting our family? You call prancing around in tights a family? You spending all day playing dress up while I bring home the real paycheck?" The truth, ugly and undeniable, hung in the air. This wasn't about the money, or the videos. This was about his fragile ego, his need for a wife who fit neatly into his outdated box of what a woman should be. Defeated, I did what he wanted. I closed the studio. My online presence dwindled to a few dry, instructional videos, a pale shadow of the passion I once poured into my content. David's demands became a suffocating cage. The house had to be spotless, not a single speck of dust daring to interrupt his pristine vision. Meals turned into a bizarre torture show: lasagna, chicken wings, potatoes with meat. Stress, combined with this fatty dishes, did a number on my body. The weight piled on, slowly at first, then with alarming speed. My reflection in the mirror became a stranger, a puffy-faced, sluggish woman who bore little resemblance to the once graceful dancer staring back. My leaps felt heavy, my turns lacked the precision I once took for granted. Even the simplest moves sent me winded and dripping with sweat. Shooting dance videos became a humiliating exercise. David would hover behind the camera, his cruel laughter echoing as I stumbled through a routine, my body betraying my every desire. "Look at those rolls jiggling, Ames. Maybe you should call this video Dancing Hippo." But the worst part wasn't the weight itself, it was the way David used it as a weapon. "Fat cow. Useless lump." These became his daily greetings, laced with a sickening smugness. When I suggested seeing a nutritionist, he scoffed. "You think a few kale chips will make all those creepy guys online forget about your jiggle factor?" One evening, as I shuffled through the kitchen, David stopped me, his eyes raking over my body with undisguised disgust. "You know, Ames," he drawled, "it's no wonder your real parents dumped you. Look at you now, a fat, washed-up nobody. Who else would put up with you?" His words hung in the air, a venomous snake coiling around my heart. As if David's relentless digs weren't enough, Beatrice decided to add her own brand of misery to the mix. One afternoon, while David was at work, she barged into the house, a self-satisfied smirk plastered on her face. "So, Amelia," she chirped, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "when are you going to bless David with some kids? TikTok, you know, biological clock and all that." I gritted my teeth. The mere thought of bringing a child into this toxic environment sent chills down my spine. Having kids had always been a dream, but not with David, not like this. A child deserved a loving, supportive home, not a pressure cooker of negativity and control. "We'll talk about it, Beatrice," I mumbled, forcing a smile. She narrowed her eyes, the smile evaporating. "Talk about it? Amelia, David needs an heir. This apartment isn't going to stay empty forever, you know." Her words were laced with a possessiveness that made me want to scream. This wasn't about giving David a child, this was about securing her hold on the family, about ensuring I remained trapped. The decision to take birth control was one of the few things I did for myself in that suffocating time. David, predictably, wasn't happy when his nightly prodding, as he charmingly called it, failed to produce the desired result. The already strained relationship between us dipped further into icy silence. One evening, as I sat on the couch, he stomped into the living room, a dark cloud hanging over him. "What's the deal, Ames?" he barked. "You acting like a friggin' nun lately? Is there something wrong with you?" I met his gaze, a newfound steely resolve settling in my gut. "There's nothing wrong with me, David," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Except maybe being stuck in this loveless marriage." His face contorted in rage. "Loveless? Don't you dare pull that crap. Who put a roof over your head, huh? Who feeds you?" His voice rose with each question, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. I stood up, my reflection in the TV's glossy screen showing a woman I barely recognized, the spark of defiance back in her eyes. "You may provide the roof, David," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "But you stole my happiness. You stole my dreams." He lunged towards me, but I sidestepped him, my newfound awareness of my body surprising even me. "Don't touch me," I spat, my voice laced with a scrap of pride. My body, burdened by the extra weight and constant stress, started rebelling. I'd wake up feeling like I'd wrestled a grizzly bear in my sleep, a dull ache throbbing behind my eyes that wouldn't budge. Simple tasks like cleaning or cooking became monumental efforts, leaving me breathless and yearning for the comfort of the couch. Of course, David had no sympathy. My pleas for a break, a doctor's visit, were met with derision. "Quit your whining, Ames," he'd growl. "A little fatigue won't kill you. Just get your chores done." One evening, the world began to spin. I was making dinner, chopping vegetables with hands that felt numb and clumsy. The room tilted, the fluorescent kitchen light turning into a blinding starburst. My vision blurred, the rhythmic thud of the knife hitting the cutting board replaced by a dull roar in my ears. The next thing I knew, the cold tile floor greeted my cheek, the metallic tang of blood filling my mouth. A harsh voice cut through the fog clouding my mind. "Get the hell up, Amelia. Dinner's getting cold. It was David, his face contorted in a mask of fury. He grabbed my legs, shaking them roughly. Stop playing dead and get me some food. Pain lanced through my head, a searing counterpoint to the dizziness, threatening to pull me back under. I can't. I tried to speak, but all that came out was a weak moan. The world faded again, the darkness this time a welcome embrace. Consciousness flickered back like a faulty light bulb. The sterile white wall swam in and out of focus, the rhythmic beep of a machine, the only sound breaking the silence. This wasn't my apartment. Panic clawed at my throat, a dry rasp escaping my lips. Easy there, dear. A soothing voice cooed beside me. A kind-faced nurse hovered nearby, her touch gentle as she checked my vitals. You're safe now. You're at mercy, General. What happened? My voice emerged dry and weak. The events of the kitchen swirled in my head, the dizziness, the cold floor, David's angry face. Pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. You fainted, the nurse explained. Your husband brought you in. He seemed pretty agitated, demanding we get you back on your feet quick. The doctor will be in to see you shortly. A microinfarction. The doctor's words echoed in my mind, a stark warning. He'd painted a grim picture, continued stress, the unhealthy lifestyle, it could all lead to something much worse, paralysis. The threat struck a chord deep within me. Paralysis. The image of myself, trapped, helpless, filled me with a primal fear. Lying in that sterile bed, a new resolve solidified. Change. I needed to change. For my health, for my sanity, for the life I still craved. The next morning, the rhythmic beeping of the machines was replaced by a knock on the door. A jolt of fear shot through me, but it was quickly replaced by surprise as two uniformed officers entered the room. Mrs. Amelia Jones? The taller officer, a woman with a kind but firm face, inquired. Yes, that's me, I croaked, my voice still recovering. We're Officers Ramirez and Lee. The other officer, a man with a no-nonsense air, introduced themselves. The doctors informed us about the bruises on your arms and legs, Mrs. Jones. Tears welled up in my eyes, threatening to spill over. Taking a deep breath, I nodded. It's my husband, I confessed, my voice thick with emotion. The officers exchanged a look. Officer Lee pulled up a chair beside my bed. Can you tell us what happened, Mrs. Jones? He asked, his voice calm and reassuring. And so I did. I recounted the details of my life with David, the emotional abuse, the constant belittlement, and finally, the violence that led to my collapse. Their faces, initially neutral, hardened with anger as I spoke. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. The day of my discharge from the hospital was bittersweet. The house, a small inheritance from my parents, had been gathering dust while I'd been trapped in my marriage. But as I walked through the door, sunlight streaming through the windows, it felt like a new beginning. The initial euphoria, however, was short-lived. My phone would buzz with unknown numbers, a chilling voice spewing threats and insults. You think you can just run away, Amelia? A voice snarled down the phone one evening. I'll find you. You'll come crawling back to me, begging for forgiveness. It was David. My heart hammered against my ribs, fear threatening to consume me. But then, a surge of anger replaced the fear. I wouldn't let him win. Grabbing my recorder, I hit the record button. Leave me alone, David. I managed, my voice shaky, but firm. Don't tell me what to do, he roared back. You're mine, Amelia. You always will be. Don't listen to him, Amelia. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Sarah, advised when I relayed the harassing calls. We'll get a restraining order, and the police will take care of the rest. The court case culminated in a tense courtroom setting. David, his face red with anger, sat across from me, while Beatrice glared daggers from the back row. The judge, a stern-looking woman with a graying bun, turned to me, her gaze firm but kind. Considering the evidence presented, including witness testimonies and the audio recordings, the court finds in favor of Mrs. Amelia Jones. A permanent restraining order is hereby granted, forbidding Mr. David Jones from approaching Mrs. Amelia Jones within 500 feet, or from contacting her in any way, directly or indirectly, through third parties, or through social media. David opened his mouth to protest, but his lawyer, a harried-looking man, placed a restraining hand on his arm. Beatrice, her face a mask of fury, stormed out of the courtroom. David, defeated, slumped back in his chair, his face ashen. Furthermore, the judge continued, her voice ringing through the courtroom, Mr. David Jones will be required to pay Mrs. Amelia Jones a sum of, she paused, consulting the documents before her, $2,000 per month in spousal support for a period of 2 years, considering the financial disparity between the parties. A gasp escaped David's lips. Spousal support? He'd expected me to crawl back, not walk away financially secure. The sterile comfort of the hospital room felt like a lifetime ago. Back in my own house, the disquiet that had gnawed at me for weeks intensified. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside my window sent a jolt of fear through me. I knew I couldn't stay. David's threats, the relentless phone calls, and Beatrice's venomous messages had taken their toll, chipping away at the fragile sense of security I'd built. Selling the house was a nerve-wracking process. I confided in Sarah, my lawyer, who helped me navigate the legalities while keeping everything under wraps. We can't risk David or Beatrice finding out, Amelia, she warned, her face grim. A fresh start is exactly what you need. And I sold my house to a charming married couple. Starting anew in a different city was both terrifying and exhilarating. Finding a small, cozy apartment felt like a victory. The first tendrils of hope started to take root, nurtured by the anonymity of my new surroundings. And then, there was dance. The dance studio, once a cherished haven, had become a painful reminder of what I'd lost. But the fire in my soul, the rhythm coursing through my veins, refused to be extinguished. Hesitantly, I rented a small space, the creak of the wooden floorboards a welcome sound this time. As the weeks turned into months, the studio blossomed into a sanctuary. The joy of movement returned, each step a testament to my resilience. My body, once burdened by fear and neglect, had transformed. The weight I'd lost wasn't just physical, it was the shedding of a life that no longer served me. One evening, as I was finalizing the schedule for upcoming classes, the shrill ring of the phone pierced the quiet. My heart hammered against my ribs as an unknown number flashed on the screen. With a deep breath, I answered. Amelia? The voice on the other end was laced with venom, instantly recognizable. It's David. A wave of nausea washed over me, but I forced my voice to stay steady. What do you want? You know what I want, he snarled. You come crawling back, begging for forgiveness, or I'll burn this whole damn place to the ground. A strangled cry escaped my lips. For a horrifying moment, the image of flames engulfing my new apartment filled my vision. But then, a spark of insight ignited within me. David didn't know. He didn't know I'd moved. Go ahead, David, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. Burn it all down. Just make sure you're doing everything right. Fury laced his voice as he sputtered threats, but I cut him off, hanging up before he could say another word. Panic clawed at me, but I quickly dialed the police. Explaining David's threats, the urgency in my voice resonated through the phone. To my relief, they took it seriously. We'll send a patrol car to your former house to check things out, Mrs. Jones, the officer on the other end assured me. And as for your ex-husband, we'll pay him a visit as well. Later that evening, a wave of relief washed over me as the police confirmed they'd apprehended David at his home, a Molotov cocktail half-assembled on his kitchen counter. The atmosphere of the courtroom felt a world away from the warmth of my dance studio. David sat across the room, a caged animal, his eyes flickering with a mix of defiance and fear. Beatrice hovered outside the courtroom, her once perfectly coiffed hair a mess, her designer suit hanging limply off her gaunt frame. She caught me outside the bathroom, her voice a desperate rasp. "Amelia, please," she pleaded, her eyes red-rimmed. "Think of David, of the family. Don't put him away." "Family?" I scoffed, that hurt a dull ache in my chest. The only family he ever cared about was the one he controlled. The prosecution presented a clear case: the Molotov cocktail found in David's kitchen, the threatening phone call, even a neighbor who'd seen David lurking around my old house the night before his arrest. As I took the stand, David's gaze burned into me, but I held it, my voice steady as I recounted the details of the call, the chilling threat of burning the whole damn place to the ground. The verdict was swift and merciless: 5 years behind bars. A flicker of satisfaction sparked within me, quickly replaced by a wave of relief. Justice, though delayed, had finally been served. My dance school blossomed. The small studio expanded, filled with the laughter and joy of movement. Looking at the faces of my students, their eyes alight with passion, a sense of completion washed over me. One evening, a notification popped up on my phone. An email from a prestigious dance company, requesting a collaboration. A wide smile stretched across my face. This was more than just a second chance, it was a new beginning, a melody, composed on my own terms. Spring break that year, the gang, Maya, the firecracker with an infectious laugh, Ben, the perpetually broke artist with a heart of gold, and Sarah, the voice of reason who somehow kept us all tethered to reality, decided to go all out. We pooled our meager savings, raided every discount code we could find online, and ended up with a weekend yacht rental down at the coast. "Are you seriously telling me we're actually doing this?" I asked, squinting at the sleek white yacht bobbing in the marina. It felt surreal, like we'd stumbled into a movie set. "Yup," Maya grinned, her dark eyes sparkling with mischief. "Sun, sea, and enough questionable life choices to last a lifetime." The salty breeze whipped my hair into a frenzy as we set sail. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning my skin the color of a well-worn leather jacket. The rhythmic slap of waves against the hull was a soothing lullaby, punctuated by the raucous laughter of my friends as they tried to master the art of sailing. Docking at the yacht club for lunch, we were greeted by a scene straight out of a luxury magazine. Gleaming yachts lined the pier, their owners sipping cocktails under giant umbrellas. We, however, stuck out like sore thumbs in our mismatched beach wear and overflowing backpacks. Suddenly, a voice broke through the cacophony. "Lost, are you?" I turned to see him, a man with eyes that held the blue of the ocean and a smile that could melt glaciers. He was tall, tanned, and exuded an aura of effortless confidence that made my breath hitch. No," stammered Sarah, ever the social butterfly. "Just admiring the scenery." "Well, the best scenery is always out at sea," he said, his gaze settling on me. "My name's Anthony. You guys wouldn't happen to be looking for an adventure, would you?" A slow smile crept across my face. "Adventure?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow at Maya, who shrugged mischievously. "Maybe. What kind of adventure did you have in mind?" "How about I take you all for a spin?" Anthony gestured towards his own yacht, even bigger and more luxurious than the others around us. "My treat." I exchanged another glance with Maya. "We can't exactly just." "Come on, Kylie," Ben chimed in, his artist's eyes gleaming with excitement. "When are we ever going to get another chance to sail on a yacht like that?" "Yeah," Maya added, nudging me with her elbow. "Live a little, right?" Anthony chuckled. "Exactly. So, what do you say?" Hesitation flickered across me, this whole situation felt too good to be true. But then I looked at my friends, their faces brimming with anticipation, and the accountant in me took a back seat to the thrill seeker. "All right," I said, a grin spreading across my face. "Let's do it." Stepping onto Anthony's yacht was like entering another world. Plush carpeting, gleaming mahogany furniture, and a stocked bar that could rival any high-end restaurant, it was the kind of luxury I'd only ever seen in magazines. "Wow," I breathed, taking it all in. "Welcome aboard," Anthony said, offering me his hand. His touch sent a jolt through me, a spark that had nothing to do with the borrowed life raft vest strapped to my chest. The rest of the weekend felt like a dream. We snorkeled in crystal-clear waters, kayaked through secluded coves, and spent evenings sprawled on the deck under a sky thick with stars. Anthony and I spent most of the time together, talking about everything and nothing. He was funny, intelligent, and surprisingly down-to-earth, despite his obvious wealth. By the time we reluctantly disembarked at the end of the weekend, we were both sporting impressive tans and a connection that went deeper than just sun-kissed skin. We exchanged numbers, promising to stay in touch, and a small part of me wondered if this was the end of our fairy tale. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. A few days later, Anthony called, inviting me to a quaint little cafe he knew. We spent hours lost in conversation, and by the end of the night, it was clear that the spark we'd shared on the yacht had only grown stronger. We started dating soon after, and it felt like everything fell into place. Anthony treated me like a queen, showering me with affection and introducing me to a world I'd never known existed. Fine dining, weekend getaways, and even a surprise hot air balloon ride, he pulled out all the stops. A year later, while on a romantic weekend in Paris, Anthony got down on one knee, a dazzling diamond ring glinting in the candlelight. "Kylie," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "will you marry me?" Tears welled up in my eyes. "Yes," I whispered, the word a burst of joy and disbelief. Meeting his mother, Eleanor, was a different story altogether. A tall, imposing woman with an icy stare that could curdle milk, she surveyed me from head to toe the moment I stepped through the door of their mansion. "So, you're the one who captured Anthony's heart," she said, her tone laced with something that felt suspiciously like disdain. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Davenport," I replied, trying to project an air of confidence despite the butterflies fluttering in my stomach. The rest of the evening was a tense affair. Eleanor made subtle jabs about my background, read, not born with a silver spoon, and seemed determined to find fault with everything I did. Anthony, bless his heart, tried to bridge the gap, but the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, as I was getting ready to leave, Eleanor pulled me aside. "Look, Kylie," she said, her voice surprisingly low. "I may not be thrilled about your social standing. But Anthony loves you, and that's all that matters. Just don't disappoint him." The eyes were barely dry before Anthony announced, with a mischievous glint in his eyes, "There's a little surprise waiting for you at the company, Mrs. Davenport." Eleanor's perfectly arched eyebrow shot up. "A surprise, you say?" Her voice held a hint of suspicion, a quality I was becoming increasingly familiar with. "Just a little something to keep Kylie busy," Anthony reassured her, squeezing my hand. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. What surprise? The surprise turned out to be a corner office overlooking the bustling city skyline and a shiny new title, assistant accountant. Eleanor Davenport Industries, a steel and concrete empire built from scratch by the formidable woman herself, was now my workplace. Working alongside Anthony was a dream come true. We exchanged stolen glances and whispered jokes during meetings, a secret language only we understood. But navigating the minefield that was Eleanor's presence was a whole other story. Our interactions were limited to clipped greetings and terse exchanges during family dinners. It was a tense ballet of forced smiles and polite conversation, punctuated by Anthony's booming laughter as he tried, mostly in vain, to lighten the mood. Years flew by in a blur of board meetings, quarterly reports, and the gnawing ache of an unfulfilled dream. Getting pregnant, it seemed, wasn't as simple as the sappy romance novels I devoured in college. Doctor visits became a routine, each negative pregnancy test a tiny punch to the gut. Anthony remained a rock, his love unwavering, but I saw the flicker of disappointment cloud his eyes sometimes. I buried myself in work, pouring my energy into the company. Eleanor, surprisingly, didn't seem to mind. In fact, she'd occasionally toss a compliment my way, acknowledging a well-structured report or a particularly insightful suggestion. It was a small victory, a grudging acceptance of my abilities, but a victory nonetheless. One evening, after a particularly grueling board meeting, Eleanor caught me packing up my briefcase. "You're good at your job, Kylie," Eleanor began, her voice devoid of its usual frostiness. "Damn good, actually." A shy smile tugged at the corner of my lips. "Thank you, Mrs. Davenport." "But," she continued, her gaze turning steely, "work shouldn't be your entire life. You and Anthony." She trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. But the unspoken message hung heavy in the air. "You and Anthony need to start a family." "We're trying," I blurted out, surprising myself with my honesty. "We've been trying for years, but—" Eleanor leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "Sometimes," she said finally, "life doesn't always go according to plan. But that doesn't mean there isn't happiness to be found." Her words were cryptic, yet strangely comforting. Was it a softening? A flicker of empathy beneath the steely exterior? It was hard to tell. At one of the family dinners at Eleanor's house, Anthony strutted into the kitchen, a triumphant grin plastered on his face. "Guess who just hired the most stunning secretary the company's ever seen?" he announced, wrapping his arm around me in a hug that felt more performative than usual. I stifled a sigh. Anthony had a way of making even the most mundane announcements sound like earth-shattering news. "Really?" I managed, forcing a smile. "Who is she?" "Tiffany," he said, his voice dropping a seductive octave. "Blonde hair, legs that go on for miles, and a smile that could melt glaciers." Eleanor, who had been engrossed in the financial section of the newspaper, finally lowered it with a sigh. "New secretary, huh?" she said, her gaze sharp as a hawk's. "Yeah," Anthony beamed. "Think she'll liven up the place a bit, don't you?" "Let's just hope she can handle a phone and a keyboard," I muttered under my breath. The remark slipped out before I could stop it. Anthony's grin faltered, and a flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Come on, Kylie," he said, his voice laced with a playful jab. "Don't be jealous, because the new girl has legs that could go all the way to next Tuesday." Heat flooded my cheeks. Jealous? Honestly, the thought hadn't even crossed my mind. I was more concerned about Anthony's hiring practices than threatened by some clueless blonde bombshell. But before I could retort, Eleanor slammed her newspaper down on the table, the sound echoing through the opulent dining room. "Jealous?" she boomed, her voice laced with steel. "Kylie is your wife, and a damn good accountant at that. You'd do well to remember that. Looks fade, Anthony, but intelligence and loyalty? Those are qualities to treasure." My jaw dropped. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine Eleanor coming to my defense like that. A flicker of warmth, a rare spark of something resembling approval, warmed her icy blue eyes. Anthony, still flustered, mumbled an apology. "Look, Kylie, I was just kidding around. Tiffany seems eager to learn, that's all." I wasn't quite convinced, but I decided not to push it any further. Eleanor's unexpected intervention had caught me off guard, but I couldn't deny it felt good to have her on my side, even for a fleeting moment. Months crawled by, and Tiffany, the so-called secretary, remained a thorn in my side. Her skirts seemed to get shorter with each passing week, clinging to her curves like a second skin. One particularly egregious day, she sashayed into the office wearing a blouse that wouldn't have looked out of place in a nightclub. "Honey," I couldn't help but mutter under my breath, "this is an office, not a peep show." Tiffany, of course, had to overhear. She stopped mid-twirl, a saccharine smile plastered on her face. "Oh, this old thing?" she cooed, batting her eyelashes at me. "Unlike some of us, I can actually pull off any style." It was infuriating. The way she sashayed around the office, her every movement calculated to draw attention, was like nails on a chalkboard. Worse, Anthony seemed completely oblivious, or worse, encouraging it. The final straw came one evening when Anthony, reeking of cologne that wasn't mine, announced he was dropping Tiffany off at home since she missed her bus. "Maybe I should take a cab home more often," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Since you seem to be so busy these days." Anthony's face flushed. "That's not what I meant," he stammered. "Look, it's nothing. Just a ride home. No big deal." But it was a big deal. It was a giant, flashing neon sign screaming infidelity right in my face. And I was done ignoring it. The walk home felt like an eternity. The city lights blurred into a kaleidoscope of colors as tears streamed down my face, each drop a tiny shard of heartbreak. A taxi finally screeched to a halt, its yellow glow a beacon in the gathering darkness. As the night deepened, the silence in the apartment became deafening. Anthony still hadn't come home. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel lonely. I felt adrift, unmoored from the life I thought I'd built. The following days were a blur of forced normalcy. Anthony avoided me, his apology text a pathetic attempt at damage control. I kept my head down at work, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry bees in a hive. Then, one seemingly ordinary Tuesday, the dam broke. I was heading to the break room for a much-needed coffee fix when I heard a familiar giggle coming from Anthony's office. My heart skipped a beat, a cold dread settling in my stomach. Without a second thought, I threw open the door, the sight that greeted me making the blood drain from my face. Anthony was sprawled on the couch, his tie askew, his face flushed. Tiffany, her skirt hiked up to a point of no return, straightened her blouse with a smirk that could curdle milk. "Well," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, the coldness in it sharper than a glacier. "Look who decided to throw an impromptu office party." Anthony scrambled to his feet, his face a mask of guilt and panic. "Kylie, it's not what it looks like," he stammered. "Oh, really?" I raised an eyebrow, my gaze flickering between them. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty damn incriminating." Tiffany, the little viper, had the audacity to laugh. "Relax, uptight. It was just a little fun." "Fun?" I repeated, my voice laced with venom. "At the expense of our marriage? You're both pathetic." That evening, as I sat hunched over a laptop, Anthony sauntered into the living room, a smug grin plastered on his face. He tossed a document onto the coffee table in front of me, the crisp white paper crackling like a gunshot in the silence. "There," he announced, his voice laced with a bravado that did little to mask the underlying nervousness in his eyes. "Divorce papers. Sign them, and let's get this over with. This marriage is over. It's been over for a while now, frankly." "But, why?" The question tumbled out, raw and desperate. 8 years of my life, poured into this relationship, and this was how it ended? On a crumpled piece of paper, discarded like yesterday's trash? "Why?" he repeated, a cruel edge creeping into his voice. "Because you're, you, Kylie. Uptight, boring, always working. And then there's Tiffany's pregnant," he declared, a smug satisfaction coloring his tone. "We're going to have a baby. A real family." The words were a slap in the face, a cold reminder of the unfulfilled dreams that haunted the quiet corners of our marriage. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I blinked them back, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. "So, sign the papers," he repeated, his voice clipped with impatience. "The sooner the better. Frankly, you just annoy me." Annoy him? After all these years, all I was an annoyance? A bitter laugh escaped my lips, a harsh, humorless sound that echoed in the sterile silence of the room. "Get out," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Just get out of my sight." Anthony hesitated for a moment, a flicker of something like surprise crossing his face. Then, with a shrug, he turned and headed for the bedroom. Moments later, the rumble of a suitcase being dragged across the floor filled the apartment. He emerged a few minutes later, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He didn't look at me, didn't even offer a goodbye. He simply opened the door, stepped out, and slammed it shut behind him with a finality that sent a tremor through the room. Tears finally spilled down my cheeks, hot and unchecked. I crumpled onto the couch, the weight of his betrayal a physical ache in my chest. After a while, I stumbled to my feet and picked up the divorce papers, my gaze blurring over the legalese. Suddenly, the urge to fight, to not go down without a battle, surged through me. But who could I turn to? My parents were gone, and my friends, scattered across the country, felt like a distant memory. Then, a thought struck me, a lifeline thrown across the churning sea of despair. Eleanor. She might not have been the warmest mother-in-law, but she was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who wouldn't hesitate to take down anyone who threatened her family. Eleanor's opulent living room felt more like a war room than a place of comfort. The air crackled with barely contained fury as I explained Anthony's callous departure and Tiffany's supposed pregnancy. That conniving little tart. Eleanor spat, her voice laced with ice. And Anthony? The spineless worm. Leaving you for a. She trailed off, searching for an insult that could adequately express her disgust. For someone like her. Her words, surprisingly comforting, sparked a flicker of defiance within me. There's more, I said, my voice gaining strength. I explained my suspicions about Tiffany, the exorbitant expense reports, and the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Eleanor, her eyes narrowed to slits, listened intently. When I finished, she rose from her chair with a predatory grace that sent shivers down my spine. Disappearing into her study, she returned a few moments later, a file clutched in her hand. Here, she said, handing it to me. A little secret audit I commissioned a while back. Just a hunch, you see. I opened the file, my heart hammering in my chest. It was a detailed report outlining Tiffany's creative accounting practices. Apparently, her idea of representative expenses included luxury handbags and weekend getaways. A cold smile touched my lips. This wasn't just about a cheating husband or a vindictive secretary. This was about something bigger. This was about justice. The next morning, I marched into Anthony's office, the secret audit tucked securely under my arm. He and Tiffany were locked in a heated embrace, cooing like a pair of lovebirds. Shouldn't you be packing your boxes, honey? This is my future husband's office now. Tiffany sneered at me. I ignored her, turning my gaze to Anthony, whose smugness had curdled into confusion. Actually, I said, a smile playing on my lips. It seems there's been a bit of a misunderstanding. Before they could react, I placed the file on his desk. Take a look, Anthony. Seems your little friend here has been a bit creative with the company finances. Tiffany's face drained of color. What is this? She sputtered, her voice laced with panic. Lies. You're trying to slander me. Just then, the office door swung open, revealing Eleanor, a steely glint in her eyes. Anthony, his face pale as a ghost, looked like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Enough of this, Eleanor boomed, her voice silencing the room. She turned to her son, her gaze heavy with disappointment. Anthony, she said, her voice clipped. You are hereby dismissed from your position as director. Your blatant disregard for company policy and indulgence in irregular relationships has proven you unfit for the role. Anthony stammered, his protests drowned out by his mother's icy stare. Turning to Tiffany, Eleanor continued, her voice dripping with disdain. And you, young lady, will be facing charges of embezzlement. Consider this your official termination. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Tiffany, realizing her gravy train had derailed, quickly confessed to Anthony that the pregnancy ploy was a sham. Honey, she'd purred, all fake sweetness gone. I don't need a poor lover. With that, she sashayed out of his life as quickly as she'd sashayed in, leaving him floundering and alone. Eleanor, ever the pragmatist, wasted no time. She presented Tiffany with a stark choice: return the fraudulently claimed $15,000 or face a very public lawsuit. Tiffany, with her dreams of extravagance evaporating, chose the former, coughing up the money with a defeated whimper. Needless to say, she was no longer employed by Davenport Industries. As for Anthony, well, let's just say his fall from grace was spectacular. Fired from his position as director, his access to his mother's lavish lifestyle, the fancy cars, the yacht, was swiftly revoked. The divorce proceedings were swift and, thanks to a very good lawyer, financially beneficial for me. Part of me, a bruised and battered part, wanted nothing more than to walk away from Davenport Industries, to leave the memories, and Anthony, behind. But Eleanor surprised me again. Pulling me aside after a particularly grueling board meeting, she looked at me with a newfound respect in her eyes. "Kylie," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard, "this company needs a steady hand. Someone who understands the business, someone with integrity. Someone like you." There was a beat of silence, then I took a deep breath. "All right," I said, a newfound determination filling my voice. "Let's do this." Working with Eleanor was challenging, to say the least. We still had our moments, our disagreements, but there was a newfound respect between us. We were a team, united in our vision for the future of Davenport Industries. One evening, as I was leaving the office, Eleanor stopped me. "Going out?" she asked, a hint of curiosity in her voice. "Just grabbing some takeout," I replied. "Nothing fancy?" "Well," she said, surprising me again. "Care to join me for dinner sometime? We could discuss business over a decent meal." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. Then, a laugh bubbled up from my chest, genuine and carefree. "I'd like that," I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face. The future, once uncertain, now stretched before me, filled with possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly hopeful. The road ahead might have unexpected turns, but I was ready to face them, head-on, with a newfound strength and a formidable, and surprisingly friendly, ally by my side. The world went silent the day the phone rang. It was Uncle Richard, his voice tight and choked. "Amelia, honey, there's been an accident." My breath hitched in my throat. Accidents happened, sure, fender benders, maybe a broken arm. But the dread that coiled in my stomach told a different story. "What kind of accident?" I forced the words out, my voice barely a whisper. A long pause stretched between us, punctuated by a sniffle. "A plane crash, honey. Your parents." The rest of his words blurred into a white noise. My knees buckled, and I slumped against the wall, phone clattering to the floor. 19 years old and alone. My parents, titans of the business world, Amelia and David Brooks, were gone. The following days were a blur of lawyers, accountants, and suffocating sympathy. My parents' will was clear. Brooks Industries, the company they built from the ground up, was mine. Me, Amelia Brooks, a college sophomore with a minor in literature and a major in freaking out. Uncle Richard, Dad's older brother, tried to be helpful. A gruff, old-school businessman himself, he clearly didn't know what to do with a heartbroken, anxiety-ridden niece who preferred Shakespeare to spreadsheets. "You need to be strong, Amelia," he'd say, his voice booming in my tiny apartment. Strong? I felt like a twig in a hurricane. The pressure was immense. Everyone expected me to step up, be the strong Brooks daughter. But the thought of walking into that corporate glass tower, filled with Dad's ghost and 1,000 judging eyes, sent a fresh wave of panic crashing over me. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Juggling classes, therapy sessions, and a crash course in business management left me perpetually exhausted. Uncle Richard, bless his gruff heart, hired a team of seasoned executives to guide me through the legalese and financial complexities of Brooks Industries. 5 years flew by in a relentless blur of board meetings, product launches, and late-night negotiations. The company thrived under my unconventional leadership. We embraced innovation, fostered a collaborative work environment, and most importantly, stayed true to Dad's core values of integrity and ethical business practices. One Friday evening, as I was leaving the office, Uncle Richard stopped me. "Amelia," he said, his gruff voice softer than usual. "You did good, kid. Real good. Your parents would be proud." His words, a simple acknowledgement, brought a lump to my throat. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't just keeping the company afloat. Maybe I was actually making a difference. Maybe it was time for a break. Maybe it was time for Hawaii. Hawaii was supposed to be pure relaxation. All I craved was sunshine, sand between my toes, and zero responsibility. For the first few days, I reveled in sweet idleness. I napped in a hammock like a lizard on a rock, and swam in the ocean until my fingers looked like prunes. But by the third night, the cabin fever kicked in. I showered, threw on a sundress, a rare occurrence for this jeans and t-shirt girl, and headed out to a beachfront bar that thumped with live music. I snagged a lonely stool at the end of the counter and ordered a drink that looked straight out of a cartoon, bright blue, with a tiny pineapple stuck precariously on the rim. New to these parts? A voice with a laugh that could melt glaciers came from beside me. I glanced over to see a guy, maybe a few years older than me, with sun-bleached hair and eyes that sparkled like the ocean. Something like that, I admitted, feeling my cheeks warm. First time trying a blue Hawaiian? He raised an eyebrow, amusement dancing in his eyes. First time trying anything remotely fruity, I confessed, feeling like a bit of a grandma. I'm more of a coffee-fueled workaholic kind of girl. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He was Ethan, a photographer on a freelance gig. He was funny, easy on the eyes, and surprisingly interested in my workaholic tendencies. By the time the last drop of my sugary concoction was gone, I was feeling loose, maybe a little too loose. The normally shy and reserved Amelia Brooks seemed to have vanished into thin air. "You dance?" Ethan leaned in, his voice dropping a notch. The music had shifted to a pulsating salsa beat. I hesitated for a second, then shrugged. Why not? We hit the dance floor, Ethan's hand warm and light on my waist. Maybe it was the music, maybe it was the tropical island air, or maybe it was the sugary bomb I just drank, but all my inhibitions flew out the window. But the next morning, the vacation hangover paled in comparison to the real one hitting me. My head throbbed like a drum solo, and a wave of embarrassment crashed over me as I turned in bed and saw Ethan, sprawled out beside me, sleeping soundly. Apparently, my inner dancing queen had also decided on a post-cocktail bed partner. The following moments were a blur of mumbled apologies, Ethan chuckling good-naturedly as he recounted the night's events. I buried my face in the pillow, mortified. Images of me flailing around the room in a sundress flashed before my eyes. Oh God, was I that bad? Let's just say you had a lot of energy, he said diplomatically. Though, gotta admit, it was kind of cute. Trying to salvage some shred of dignity, I forced a smile. Thanks for walking me home, and everything. We talked for a while longer, a strange mix of awkwardness and a newfound connection. But as the sun started peeking through the curtains, casting a golden glow across the room, Ethan said it was time for him to return to the mainland. I handed him a piece of paper with my number scribbled on it. Maybe, I said, the word hanging in the air. He took the paper, a slow smile spreading across his face. Maybe, he echoed. A part of me hoped Ethan would call, but with each passing hour, that hope dwindled. 3 months had flown by in a whirlwind of board meetings, product launches, and late-night negotiations. Brooks Industries was soaring, our stock price at an all-time high. Apparently, that accomplishment translated to powerful businesswoman on the evening news. There I was, plastered on the screen, hairstyled, a rare occurrence, suit impeccably tailored, the anchor droning on about my leadership genius. The next morning, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Hello? I answered cautiously. Amelia Brooks? A voice crackled through the line, a hint of amusement in its tone. Yes, this is she. Wow, didn't recognize you from the news. The voice chuckled. It's Ethan. Ethan? My heart skipped a beat. That couldn't be right. After our drunken Hawaiian encounter, I figured he'd filed me under forgettable vacation fling. Hey, I said, trying to sound nonchalant. Fancy hearing from you. Fancy seeing you too, he replied. Listen, I'm in town for a couple of days, and I was wondering if you'd be free for dinner? We made a reservation at a fancy restaurant downtown, a place I'd only ever seen in magazines. When I arrived, my stomach did a nervous flip-flop. Ethan was waiting at the bar, looking like he'd stepped out of a men's fashion catalog, perfectly coiffed hair, crisp white shirt, the kind of designer suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Next to him, in my jeans and trusty work blouse, I felt like a sparrow in a room full of peacocks. A wave of self-consciousness washed over me. Had I misread the whole thing? He spotted me and a wide grin lit up his face. He stood up, his smile turning apologetic. "Hey, sorry," he said, gesturing to my attire. "Didn't mean to scare you off with the fancy digs. Work thing, you know?" I forced a smile. "No worries," I said, trying to sound confident. Work dress code for me is more comfort over couture. The rest of the evening was a blur of conversation peppered with nervous laughter on my end. Ethan was charming, funny, and surprisingly interested in my work. "So," he said, leaning closer as we finished our dessert, "I know this might sound crazy, but I really enjoyed our time together, both in Hawaii and tonight. I was wondering, would you like to, maybe go out again sometime? Properly this time, without the tequila-induced dance party?" A wave of happiness washed over me. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a dream. Maybe, just maybe, I'd stumbled onto something real. "I'd like that," I said, a genuine smile gracing my lips. A few months zipped by in a whirlwind of adrenaline-pumping adventures, candlelit dinners at fancy restaurants, and late-night talks that stretched into the early hours. Ethan was the perfect antidote to my high-pressure world. One crisp November evening, curled up on the couch with a glass of expensive wine, Ethan got all serious on me. "Hey, Ames," he started, his voice a touch deeper than usual. "We've been having a blast together, haven't we?" My heart thumped a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Was this it? The question? "Shoot," I said, trying to sound cool even though my palms were already slick with sweat. He took a deep breath, then pulled out a small velvet box that shimmered under the soft lamplight. "Amelia Brooks," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "You're everything I ever wanted in a woman, smart, funny, a total boss. And..." He hesitated, reaching into the box. My breath hitched as he revealed a ring that sparkled like a captured star. "Amelia," he continued, dropping to one knee. "Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in my eyes. It was happening. The fairy tale ending I'd secretly longed for since I was a kid, flipping through magazines with pictures of giant white dresses and tearful vows. "Yes," I cried, throwing my arms around him so tight I swear I heard his ribs creak in protest. The following weeks were a whirlwind of wedding planning, complicated by a visit from Ethan's mother, a glamorous woman with a perfectly manicured smile. "Amelia, darling," she cooed, her eyes twinkling. "You're going to be the new star of big business. Ethan tells me all about your incredible achievements." The compliment felt a little off-putting, but I brushed it aside, focusing on picking a venue and a dress that wouldn't break the bank, even though I could have afforded anything. Before the wedding bells could even be ordered, my lawyer, a guy who'd practically known me since I was in diapers, thanks, Dad, brought up the topic of prenuptial agreements. "Just a smart move, Amelia," he said, his voice serious. "Especially with your financial situation." We talked about it with Ethan, and surprisingly, he didn't put up a fight. We drafted a fair prenup, separate property stayed separate, and there was a hefty cheating clause with a dollar amount attached that could choke a horse. Let's just say infidelity would cost him dearly. The wedding itself might not have been the extravagant ceremony I could have pulled off, but it was perfect in its own way, small, intimate, and filled with the people who loved us most. After the I-dos, Ethan moved into my spacious house. I surprised him with a brand new car, his old one looked like it belonged in a junkyard, and set him up with access to our joint account. The next day, he quit his photography gig. "I want to take care of things here, Ames," he explained, a hint of nervousness flickering in his eyes. I wasn't sure what that meant, but after the whirlwind of wedding planning, I was happy to let him handle things at home. Life after the I-dos was like stepping into a whole new reality. My mother-in-law, who'd been sweetness and light before the wedding, turned into a walking critique machine. A woman obsessed with appearances, she couldn't stop commenting on mine. "Honey, those pants make your hips look wide," she'd say, her perfectly manicured nails hovering over my outfit. Or, "Darling, a little Botox would really brighten up those eyes." It felt like she wanted to redecorate me. The final straw came when she dragged me to a plastic surgeon's office. Stepping into that sterile, judgmental space made my skin crawl. The doctor, all smooth smiles and designer stubble, started circling me with a marker, muttering about enhancing my natural beauty. "And the chest area," he announced, his gaze lingering a little too long. "Frankly, Mrs. Miller, it needs some serious work." That was it. I washed my face in the bathroom, mascara stinging my eyes, and stormed out. My mother-in-law caught up with me in the lobby. "Amelia, darling, where are you going? Don't you want to discuss the doctor's recommendations?" "Recommendations?" I scoffed. "More like a shopping list for a whole new me." "I don't need surgery, I need you to back off with these stupid suggestions." Even Ethan started chiming in. He'd drop hints about updating my wardrobe or seeing a stylist. "Ugh, give me a break." "Honey," he began one evening, "maybe it's time for a new look. You know, for your image." "And maybe," I countered, "it's time for you to get a job." He looked like a deflated balloon. "But I don't want to work for someone else anymore, Ames. I want to be the boss." His words caught me off guard. The boss of what? "An empire," he declared dramatically. "My own company." I raised an eyebrow. "Right. And what kind of empire exactly?" He shrugged. "Something creative. Like, design? Interior design maybe." The idea wasn't bad. Ethan did have a good eye for style, always rearranging furniture and picking out cool throw pillows. "All right," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "Let's do it." I hired the best consultants, helped him with the business plan, and even fronted him the initial investment. It was a risk, but I believed in him, maybe a little too much. The interior design firm took off faster than we expected. Ethan, surprisingly, turned out to be a natural at managing projects and charming clients. But his newfound success seemed to change him. He started coming home later, smelling of expensive cologne and sporting designer clothes. The cracks in our perfect picture were starting to show. But I was too busy building his dream to notice them. 3 years. Ethan's design firm had rocketed, fueled by his newfound business savvy and a carefully cultivated image. Today, we were in a bustling international business exhibition, the air thick with ambition and the clinking of deals. Ethan's latest project, a sleek, minimalist furniture line aimed at the luxury market, took center stage. I stood by his side, a silent supporter in his carefully crafted narrative. My contributions, the sleepless nights spent brainstorming concepts, and the meticulous planning that went into launching the firm, had faded into the background. A voice sliced through the cacophony. "Amelia. No way." Turning, I saw a familiar face, Mark, a classmate from high school, who'd always been a bit in awe of me. Now, his grin was confident, his suit tailored to perfection. "Mark. Wow, small world," I said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" He puffed out his chest, adjusting his designer suit. "Big things, Ames. My firm's presenting our latest line too, sustainable furniture made from recycled materials." "Pretty cool, huh?" We chatted for a while, catching up on lost years. He seemed genuinely impressed with Ethan's project. "This stuff is slick, Amelia," he said, running his hand over a sleek armchair. "You have a real eye for design." "Actually, Mark," a voice cut in, Ethan appearing beside me. "The credit goes to me. She's just here for moral support, buddy. This is my baby, all mine." My stomach churned. This wasn't the first time Ethan had downplayed my contributions, but the blatant lie stung like a fresh wound. "Oh," Mark stammered, looking slightly embarrassed. "Well, congrats then, Ethan. It's really impressive stuff." The conversation fizzled out, leaving a hollow ache in my chest. Before I could say another word, my immaculately dressed mother-in-law materialized beside us. Her smile, usually reserved for award shows and charity galas, held a hint of something else entirely. "Ethan, darling," she cooed, showering him with praise. "I always knew you had this in you. Such a natural talent." Then, her gaze shifted to me, her smile turning tight. Leaning in, she spoke in a low voice dripping with venom. "And Amelia," she purred, "a successful businessman like him deserves a wife who reflects his achievements. Someone more beautiful, more stylish, wouldn't you say?" The air hung heavy with her words. My grip tightened on my purse, the polished leather digging into my palm. With a curt nod, I excused myself and moved deeper into the exhibition hall. Talking to enthusiastic visitors about Ethan's project felt like a betrayal, yet the sting of my mother-in-law's words fueled a growing ember of rebellion within me. The adrenaline rush from the exhibition wore off the second we stepped into the opulent hotel lobby. Mark was there again, another unexpected meeting. A wide grin stretched across his face when our eyes met. "Amelia," he boomed, extending a hand. "Catch you at the exhibition, didn't think I'd see you so soon. Up for a coffee and some reminiscing?" "I'd love to," I said, then glanced at Ethan, bracing myself for a fight. To my surprise, he just shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Sure, Ames. Go ahead. I'm beat. I'll head up to the room." Surprised, I exchanged a hesitant look with Mark. "You okay with this? Won't my super successful husband get jealous of his ex-classmate stealing his wife away?" I teased, trying to gauge his reaction. He chuckled, a hollow sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Nah, go have fun. We'll chat later." With a lingering unease, I followed Mark out of the lobby. We found a quiet corner table in a nearby cafe and spent the next hour catching up. The conversation flowed easily, leaving me oddly relaxed. Back at the hotel, the luxurious suite door swung open before I could even reach for my keycard. Ethan's voice, dripping with venom, filled the room. "Honestly, Mom," he ranted, unaware of my presence, "I can't take it anymore. Living with her, it's unbearable. Haven't touched her in months." My blood ran cold. My own husband, the man who'd vowed to love and cherish me, was talking about me like I was some kind of disease. "I know, darling," cooed a voice, his mother's, laced with false sympathy. "But you have to be patient. The plan is working." "A plan? What plan?" My mind reeled, piecing together fragments of their conversation. "That stupid interview almost ruined everything," Ethan continued, pacing the room. "That's the girl from Hawaii, isn't it? The one with all that dough? Why did I ever tell you?" The pieces clicked into place. The interview I'd done promoting sustainable design, they must have seen it and realized I wasn't some struggling artist, but someone with money. Greed, not love, was the foundation of our marriage. They'd used Ethan to snag a wealthy wife. Their voices dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. My breath caught in my throat. They were talking about divorce. But not a clean break, a messy, scandalous one. They planned to frame me for infidelity, giving them leverage for a huge payout. Suddenly, Ethan's earlier behavior made sense. Leaving me alone with Mark at the lobby, hoping to manufacture some kind of incriminating evidence. The realization filled me with a cold fury. Taking a deep, cleansing breath, I stepped into the room, my voice cutting through their hushed conversation. "Ready to file those divorce papers, Ethan?" I asked, my voice calmer than I felt. They both spun around, faces etched with shock. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. "Save it," I said, my gaze unwavering. "You're free, Ethan. Absolutely free." The taxi ride to the airport was a blur of adrenaline and newfound resolve. My phone buzzed in my purse, it was Ethan. Ignoring the call, I used the banking app to freeze our joint account. Let him explain that little maneuver to his mommy dearest. Back in my own house, the silence was deafening. The phone rang again. This time, I answered with a cool indifference. Amelia, what the hell did you do? Ethan sputtered on the other end. My cards are all blocked, and how am I supposed to pay for this damn presidential suite? Consider it an early termination fee, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. From now on, you're free of me and my money. Figure it out yourself. The next morning, I marched into my lawyer's office, the same one who'd practically shoved the prenup at me all those years ago. Armed with a stack of documents and a newfound fierceness, we started the divorce proceedings. While the legalese unfolded, I wasn't wasting any time. Ethan's designer clothes, fancy toiletries, and the ridiculous collection of sports memorabilia, all neatly boxed and shipped to his mother's place. A new set of locks adorned my front door, a symbol of the boundaries I was finally setting. The real power move, however, was yet to come. The design firm Ethan ran was actually mine. I called a company-wide meeting, my heart pounding a steady rhythm in my chest. Effective immediately, I announced, my voice firm and unwavering, Mr. Miller is no longer the director of this company. Later that evening, my phone rang again. It was Ethan, his voice laced with desperation. He babbled about missing me, begging for forgiveness. In the background, I could faintly hear his mother's voice, whispering suggestions in his ear. Kids? I scoffed. Seriously? You think that'll buy you back into my life? Find another rich fool to play your games with, Ethan. I'm done. He stammered something about the car, the one he'd always claimed to love. Bought with my money, honey, I said, a satisfied smile spreading across my face. So consider it another perk of your short-lived marriage. Hanging up, a wave of exhilaration washed over me. I'd learned a harsh lesson, but one that would forever change me. The divorce was finalized swiftly, the prenup ensuring Ethan didn't get a dime. With a newfound lightness in my step, I reached out to Mark, my old classmate. We grabbed coffee, catching up like no time had passed. Maybe it wasn't love at first sight, but who knew where this new chapter might lead? Life wasn't about microwaved dinners and threadbare clothes. I used to be designer clothes every week, vacations wherever I wanted, kind of rich. Dad, the tech guru with a Midas touch, and Mom, the design was who made every LitaCorp gadget a must-have. They were loaded. My folks were all about hard work and not wasting a dime, even if it meant buying last year's model phone instead of the newest one. Then, everything went dark at 14. One afternoon, while I was arguing with Sarah, my best friend at the time, about who got the front seat for the movie, Don't Judge, 2 police officers showed up at our door. Their faces were grim, and the words they spoke felt like a punch to the gut. Plane crash, Pacific Ocean, no survivors. My parents were gone. The world became a blur of tear-stained faces and endless paperwork. School wasn't any better. Kids who used to fawn over my designer bags now avoided me like the plague. Sarah, the best friend, ditched me faster than yesterday's news. The only good thing was Nana, Dad's mom. She lived in a tiny house, a haven of comfy furniture and the delicious smell of freshly baked cookies. Nana welcomed me with open arms. Your parents raised a strong, independent girl. You'll be all right, sweetheart. Nana became my confidant, the only one who understood the emptiness gnawing at me. One day, after a fight with my former rich friends, I found Nana in her garden, surrounded by vibrant sunflowers. Tears pricked my eyes as I blurted out, "Why'd my parents lock everything away, Nana? It's not like I'm gonna blow it all on, like a diamond-encrusted poodle." Nana chuckled, a dry sound. "They knew you, honey. Knew you were special. They wanted you to learn about life, the real life, not some fake world built on money. Trust me, when you turn 25, you'll be ready." Ready for what? I didn't know. But Nana's unwavering faith and the memory of my parents' warm smiles kept me going. I learned to cook on Nana's ancient stove, devoured books at the local library, and even landed a part-time job at the bookstore downtown. Sure, it wasn't the life I was born into, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long while, a flicker of hope ignited within me. Living with my grandmother in a small house, going to a regular school, working a part-time job, it wasn't what I was used to, but keeping my past a secret was a secret weapon I planned to use wisely. College loomed ahead, and with my good grades and some government grants, I was ready to face it head-on. College life was a whirlwind. I juggled classes, a part-time job at the campus bookstore, and a mountain of instant ramen noodles. Still, I wouldn't trade it for anything. One crisp autumn afternoon, I was hunched over a particularly mind-numbing economics textbook in the library, highlighter in hand, when a voice startled me. "Dude, are you lost in Econland again?" I looked up to see a tall, goofy-looking guy with a mop of brown hair and a mischievous grin. Maybe," I stammered, feeling a blush creep up my cheeks. "I'm Isabella." "Michael," he said, extending a hand. "Looks like you could use a study break. Coffee?" We ended up at a noisy campus cafe, drowning our textbooks in steaming lattes. Michael turned out to be a computer science major with a knack for making even the most complex algorithms seem fun. We spent hours talking about classes, dreams, and the best places to score cheap pizza on campus. "So, what brought you to this little corner of the world?" Michael asked, his eyes twinkling with curiosity. I hesitated. My past life felt like a different universe, a life I wasn't sure I should share. Finally, I took a deep breath. I moved in with my grandmother after my parents passed away. It felt strange saying it out loud, even after all this time. Michael's smile softened. "Wow, that's rough. I'm so sorry." "It's okay," I mumbled, looking down at my coffee cup. "It's been a while." There was a comfortable silence for a moment, then Michael added, "You seem different from most people here." "Different how?" I challenged, a spark of curiosity igniting. "You're not all about the fancy clothes and the expensive gadgets," he said. "You seem real." I couldn't help but smile. Maybe keeping my past a secret wasn't such a bad thing. It allowed people to see me for who I was, not what I had. As the weeks turned into months, Michael became my best friend, my confidant. We spent hours studying together, exploring the city, and arguing about everything from the best way to brew coffee to the merits of different science fiction movies. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day at the bookstore, I found myself venting to Nana over a plate of her legendary chocolate chip cookies. "Ugh, Nana," I groaned, throwing myself down on the worn armchair. "People can be such jerks." Nana chuckled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Sounds like you had a rough day, sweetheart." I told her about the latte incident, about a particularly challenging calculus exam, and about my growing feelings for Michael. "He's funny, he's smart," I confessed, feeling my cheeks burn again. "But Nana, what happens when he finds out about my money?" Nana patted my hand gently. "Isabella," she said, her voice soft but firm, "a good man won't care about your money. He'll care about you, about the person you are. It just feels wrong keeping this big secret from him." Nana squeezed my hand. "There's time for that later, sweetheart. When you turn 25, you can decide what to do. Until then, focus on your studies, on your friends, and on living life to the fullest." Butterflies pirouetted in my stomach like a drunken ballet. Today was the big day, meeting Michael's parents for the first time. We were practically engaged. Pulling into Michael's childhood driveway, a wave of nervousness washed over me. Their house was a sprawling brick monstrosity, the kind with manicured lawns and a fountain that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. "Deep breaths, Isabella," I reminded myself. "You got this." The door swung open before I could even knock, revealing a woman with a perfectly coiffed blonde mane and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "This must be Michael's mom, Martha." "Isabella, so lovely to finally meet you," she chirped, her voice dripping with honeyed condescension. Come in, dear." Behind her stood a younger girl, all skinny jeans and a bored expression. "Michael's sister, Lily, I presumed." She barely glanced at me before rolling her eyes and sauntering back inside. Great first impression. Martha ushered me into a living room that looked straight out of a magazine, plush couches, gleaming hardwood floors, and enough throw pillows to build a fort. "So, Isabella," Martha began, her gaze scanning me head to toe in a way that made me feel like a used car on display. "Tell me about yourself. Where do you hail from?" "Oh, you know," I stammered, feeling the heat creep up my neck. "Just a small town girl. Grew up with my grandmother in a little one-story house." Martha's smile faltered for a split second before morphing back into a tight, plastic grin. "A one-story house, huh? Interesting." I could practically hear the unspoken judgment hanging in the air. This wasn't exactly going the way I'd hoped. Then, before I could even respond, Lily sauntered back into the room. "Mom," she drawled, flipping through a glossy magazine. "Does she even have a real job?" The question hung in the air, dripping with disdain. I almost blurted out that my family lawyer could buy their entire house with pocket change, but Nana's voice echoed in my head. "A good man won't care about your money. He'll care about you." Taking a deep breath, I met Lily's gaze head-on. "Actually," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, "I work at a bookstore downtown. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills." Lily scoffed, but I didn't back down. I wasn't some spoiled rich girl, and I wouldn't let them treat me like one. "Speaking of bills," Martha chimed in, her voice suddenly serious. "Michael mentioned you two might be thinking about, well, let's just say I've had a prenuptial agreement drawn up." Now, a prenup wasn't exactly a surprise. Honestly, with her attitude, it was probably for the best. "No problem," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. "I think that's a smart idea. Actually, I'll have my lawyer take a look at it." Lily snorted. "Lawyer? You have a lawyer?" Again, I almost let it slip about the family retainer, but I bit my tongue. "Yeah," I lied smoothly. "A friend who's good with legalese." The rest of the afternoon was a blur of awkward silences, thinly veiled insults, and enough passive-aggressive comments to choke a horse. As soon as Michael mercifully appeared, I practically flew out the door with him. The next day, a thick envelope arrived in the mail addressed to me. Inside, a document with fancy lettering proclaimed it to be the prenuptial agreement Martha had mentioned. Skimming through it, it seemed straightforward enough: a division of assets acquired during the marriage, the usual boilerplate stuff. My heart hammered in my chest. During the marriage. This was exactly what worried me. I called my actual lawyer, the one Nana had recommended years ago, and explained the situation. He chuckled after hearing about the prenup. "They're barking up the wrong tree," he assured me. "This agreement only applies to assets acquired during the marriage. Your inheritance is separate and wouldn't be affected by this in the slightest." Relief washed over me. "So, what do I do?" "Simple," he said. "Sign the darn thing. It doesn't hurt you, and it might put their minds at ease. Besides, you know what they say, keep your enemies close." A slow smile spread across my face. Maybe this whole thing wasn't so bad after all. In fact, it might be a little fun to play along with their misconceptions for a while. The wedding wasn't a lavish affair at a swanky hotel, but it was perfect. We said our vows under a canopy of fairy lights in Nana's backyard, surrounded by close friends and family. It was simple, elegant, and filled with love. Everything I ever wanted. But as the saying goes, no wedding is complete without a little drama. And drama arrived in the form of Lily, Michael's heavily made up, heavily inebriated younger sister. A few glasses of champagne in, Lily decided it was showtime. In the middle of a toast, she slurred out accusations that would make a sailor blush. "She's after his money," she shrieked, pointing a shaky finger at me. "She doesn't know the first thing about manners, or class." My cheeks burned, but I held my tongue. Michael, however, did not. He marched over to her, his voice low and dangerous. "Lily, shut your mouth. Right now." Lily just scoffed and shoved him away. "Don't touch me. You're both fools. She's just a gold digger. That was it. I'd had enough. Ignoring Michael's pleading look, I whipped out my phone and dialed the police. We have a situation here, I said calmly, explaining the scene. The party came to a screeching halt. Michael's mom turned a shade of purple, and guests exchanged stunned whispers. By the time the police arrived, Lily was sprawled on a lawn chair, muttering incoherent threats. The rest of the night was a blur. The police took Lily away, vowing to talk to her in the morning when she was sober. Michael apologized profusely, his face etched with shame. His mom, however, were a different story. Martha glared at me like I'd personally insulted the queen. You've disgraced this family, she hissed, her voice tight with fury. Now the press will have a field day with this. Honestly, I didn't care. Their family drama? Not my problem. In fact, the prospect of less Martha in my life was kind of appealing. 2 years flew by in a blur of designer shopping sprees, fancy dinners, and a growing emptiness in the pit of my stomach. The cracks in our relationship, once hairline fractures, had widened into gaping chasms. Michael, the charming, attentive man I fell in love with, seemed to have vanished. In his place stood a stranger, a workaholic with a bottomless pit for money and a vocabulary increasingly laced with his mother's venomous barbs. He'd stay late at the office, returning home well past midnight, reeking of expensive cologne and a vague dissatisfaction that hung heavy in the air. One evening, as he scoffed at my suggestion for a cozy night in, a familiar phrase slipped from his lips. Honestly, Isabella, he drawled. Sometimes I wonder if you understand the beauty of big money. It was Martha's voice echoing through his, a cold, condescending sneer disguised as playful teasing. My blood ran cold. The urge to blurt out the truth, to reveal the hefty inheritance waiting for me on my 25th birthday, was a constant itch under my skin. But Nana's words always rang in my ears, true love doesn't need money to survive. So I swallowed the truth, the bitter pill lodged in my throat. Desperate to salvage our crumbling marriage, I brought up the topic of children. Maybe it's time we started a family, I suggested tentatively, a hopeful smile plastered on my face. Michael's response was like a slap in the face. A kid? Seriously? He scoffed. Don't you think that's a bit convenient? Trying to trap me here with a baby? His words echoed in the silence, each syllable dripping with suspicion. He was repeating his mother's twisted narrative, turning my desire for a family into a manipulative ploy. However, after a couple of months I threw myself into planning Michael's birthday party with a fervor bordering on desperation. It was a desperate attempt to recapture the spark, to remind him of the happy couple we once were. I envisioned a lively gathering, filled with laughter and good company. Maybe, just maybe, it would reignite the flame that seemed to be flickering out. I sent out invitations, meticulously crafting a guest list that included all his friends, colleagues, and with a heavy heart, his mother and sister. In my heart of hearts, I hoped they'd decline. Their presence was guaranteed to inject a healthy dose of drama into the celebration, which was the last thing I needed. The day arrived, a perfect blend of sunshine and warmth. The house buzzed with activity as friends streamed in, bearing gifts and good cheer. Michael, dressed in a crisp new shirt, a birthday gift, naturally, beamed as he received congratulations and well wishes. A sliver of hope flickered within me. Maybe, just maybe, this could be a turning point. A discordant note, however, shattered the illusion. Just as Michael and I were about to cut the cake, the doorbell chimed. My stomach clenched. It was them. Martha, resplendent in a designer outfit that screamed "Look at me," and Lily, her younger sister, looking like a runaway from a bad reality TV show. Lily, clad in a dress that left little to the imagination, made a beeline for the champagne table. A wave of nausea washed over me. Lily, notorious for her inability to hold her liquor, was a disaster waiting to happen. I opened my mouth to warn Michael, but he was already engrossed in conversation with his mother, oblivious to the approaching storm. As predicted, the champagne flowed freely, and with it, Lily's inhibitions. Soon, she was weaving through the party, a tipsy hurricane in a sequined dress. Her voice grew louder with each passing glass, her words laced with a malicious intent. "You'll never be one of us," she slurred, pointing a drunken finger at me. "You're just a gold digger, after Michael's money and his family name." Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring the scene before me. But Michael, oblivious to my distress, remained glued to his mother's side, his back turned on me. He didn't even spare me a glance as Lily launched into a tirade about my supposed inadequacies as a wife and future mother. "You'll never carry on the family lineage," she screeched, waving a sheaf of papers in the air. "You'll only give birth to weak, pathetic babies." My vision swam. Shame and anger warred within me. Then, amidst the drunken chaos, Lily stumbled, her high heels betraying her. With a graceless shriek, she tumbled into the pool, landing in a heap of soaked sequins and misplaced pride. I rushed forward to help, more out of instinct than anything else. That's when I saw it, the papers Lily had been clutching lay on the ground, partially obscured by the pool water. Curiosity overcoming my emotional turmoil, I picked them up. My blood ran cold as I recognized the document, divorce papers. Signed by Michael. The date scrawled at the bottom confirmed my worst fears. Tears stinging my eyes, I stormed back into the house, the party atmosphere a grotesque parody of happiness. There, in the middle of the living room, stood Martha, a smug smile plastered on her face. Before I could speak, she launched into a tirade. "Well, Isabella," she purred, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Looks like your little plan backfired, didn't it?" "What plan?" I spat, my voice tight with anger. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, dear," she sneered. "Trying to get pregnant, trap Michael, a classic gold digger move." Betrayal, raw and searing, ripped through me. I glanced at Michael, searching for a flicker of denial, a shred of the man I thought I knew. But his gaze remained fixed on the floor. Fury replaced the pain. "Fine," I choked out, snatching the divorce papers from his hand. "If that's what you want." With a trembling hand, I grabbed a pen from the table and signed the document with a flourish. A gasp rippled through the crowd, but I ignored it. Let them watch. Let them see the sham of a marriage I'd been living in. "There," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Happy now?" The room was silent, the air thick with tension. Then, I reached for my phone and dialed a familiar number. "Nana?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "Can you come get me? Now?" A few minutes later, my grandmother, bless her heart, materialized in the doorway. Relief washed over me, warm and familiar. "What's going on here, Izzy?" Nana asked, her eyes taking in the scene with a sharp glint. Taking a deep breath, I launched into the whole sordid story, Michael's accusations, Martha's manipulations, the betrayal that felt like a physical blow. By the time I finished, a slow smile was spreading across Nana's face. "That's all?" she chuckled, her voice laced with amusement. Before I could reply, she turned to Michael and his mother, her voice laced with steel. "Listen up, you two," she began. "Isabella doesn't need your money or your pathetic family name. She's an heiress in her own right, set to inherit a vast fortune on her 25th birthday, which is, by the way, in a month." The color drained from Martha's face. Her smug smile had morphed into a mask of disbelief. "Heiress?" she stammered. But Michael said. "Michael listens to his mommy a little too much, wouldn't you say?" Nana retorted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Martha sputtered, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. "Isabella," she croaked, her voice laced with desperation. "Forgive me. I was wrong. You deserve my son." Now it was my turn to scoff. Deserve? Their love had been built on lies and suspicion. The taste of betrayal lingered bitter on my tongue. As if on cue, a loud honking sound came from the driveway. My surprise gift, a top-of-the-line sports car, had arrived. A car I'd secretly bought for Michael, using money from my hidden account. Sliding behind the wheel, I gestured for Nana to join me. "Let's go, Nana," I said, my voice firm. "From now on, my lawyer will be dealing with all of you." As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced back at Michael and his mother, their faces a picture of stunned silence. Leaning out the window, I added one last parting shot. "Oh, and by the way," I said, a mischievous glint in my eyes, "I recorded the whole thing, including your little drunken performance, Lily." I held up my phone, showing them the social media post with a rapidly rising number of. The roar of the engine filled the air as I peeled out of the driveway, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a family drama for the ages. A week after the dust settled from the divorce drama, the phone rang. It was Martha. Honey dripping from her voice, she launched into a desperate plea for reconciliation. Apparently, Michael was lost without me, and they both wanted me back in their perfect little family. I cut her short. "Thanks for the offer, Martha," I said, my voice cool. "But the damage is done. Move on." Then came Michael. He showed up at my doorstep, looking like a kicked puppy in a Brioni suit. A sob story about his manipulative mother and his undying love for me tumbled out of his mouth. "Yeah, right. Spare me the crocodile tears, Michael," I said, my voice laced with steel. "Actions speak louder than words. You had your chance." He hung his head, defeated. There weren't any grand gestures, no groveling or apologies worth a damn. Just another attempt at manipulating me back into his life. "Goodbye, Michael," I said, shutting the door firmly. Nana and I remained in our cozy little house on Maple Street. Forget mansions, this place held memories, laughter, and the comforting aroma of Nana's famous apple pie. My 25th birthday arrived, ushering in a tidal wave of wealth. The inheritance was staggering, more money than I could ever dream of spending. But luxury cars and designer clothes held no appeal. Instead, I channeled that wealth into something meaningful. The Isabella Foundation, dedicated to my beloved parents, was born. This foundation offered a lifeline to people struggling financially, a way up from the quicksand of debt and hardship. It was my way of giving back, of making a difference in the world. Running the foundation kept me busy, but it was the most rewarding work I'd ever done. Reading success stories, witnessing the hope blossom in people's eyes, that's what fueled me. The sting of betrayal had faded, replaced by a quiet satisfaction.